Hi everyone, we will be sharing with you all the evolutionary perspective on risk-taking. First, we're going to go through the 5 domains of risk-taking by researchers Kruger, Wang, and Wilkie in 2007. Then look at the gender differences within risk-taking, and then take a look at risk-taking with competition and survival, and then finally risk-taking within children and adolescents. The first thing we wanted to go over is the 5 domains of risk-taking. Risk-taking has been found to be domain-specific. These domains are the problems and pressures humans faced early on that give rise to cognitive and behavioral adaptations of risk-taking. The 5 domains are between group competition, within group competition, resource allocation for costly signaling and mate attractions, mating risks, and environmental risks. Between group competition has risks associated with increasing survival success, while within group competition are risks mostly associated to increased likelihood of reproductive success. Within group competition consists of both social and physical competition, most in the name for reproductive success. To prove themselves superior, males take more risk to show dominance over other males to increase likelihood of mating or to increase mating success. Resources are risks taken to acquire more resources or to make males more attractive to females that they are a good mate. This can also be applied well to modern times as people take more risks in investing and saving. Mating risks could be risks such as mate with the wrong person and you might end up a single parent or not pregnant at all. It also could be about allocating resources for mating effort at the expense of parental effort or vice versa. Men who want to have many sexual partners increase the likelihood for reproductive success, but there's also risks of paternal certainty in these short-term relationships. Environmental risks are risks having to do with foraging, hunting, and shelter, which are associated with increasing survival success. So now that we have a good handle on the domains of risk-taking, let's look at the research article. The article provides some great insight and evidence for the gender differences in risk-taking, which Chinny will talk about more later. The researchers started off by talking about how decision-making is driven by emotions and goals, which makes sense. I'm going to make a decision that best lines up with my goals. The evolutionary perspective on decision-making is similar in that emotions and goals motivate specific cognitive and behavioral tendencies that ultimately increase reproductive success. The researchers' goal was to better understand when a risky decision is likely to occur, but more specifically is the relationship between mating motivation and risk-taking associated with enhanced processing of attractive faces. What they did. Participants viewed either attractive or unattractive faces of the opposite sex, seeing each photo for 5 seconds for a total of 10 photos. They were then assessed for level of attractive romantic motivation. To assess risk-taking behavior, they then completed a blackjack task in which they could either take the risk and hit, or avoid the risk and stay. What was being measured was how many times they chose to hit or to take another card. They played 11 rounds of this. Following blackjack, they took a memory test for the faces they had seen before. What they found. If we look right here at the green square, there's a strong positive correlation between motivation to pursue romantic sexual relationships and risky decisions in the attractive faces conditions for males. In the unattractive condition, there was a negative correlation between motivation and risky behaviors. Then if we take a look at the second column, there is a strong correlation between memory and risk-taking in the attractive face condition, but there was not a strong correlation in the unattractive condition for men. Then if we take a look at the women's side, there's no strong correlations between risk-taking and motivation or risk-taking and memory in either condition. The researchers concluded that the motivation to pursue a mate is positively associated with risk-taking, but only in males and only if the mate is attractive. Men who also viewed attractive faces and who had better memory for the faces also took more risks. Their results are consistent with that risk-taking is related to sexual motivation to increase reproductive success. They also added that simply viewing the attractive faces did not increase risk-taking in men, but that the men had to be motivated to pursue a relationship to partake in this risky behavior. This makes sense because if risk-taking will hopefully increase the likelihood of reproductive success, they need to be motivated to pursue relations. No motivation to pursue, then why take the risk? Their evidence supports that gender differences in risk-taking is most likely due to high density within group competition, while with other males, as women did not experience this as much. Desirable traits for males can be determined by making risky decisions like challenging other males for social standing, which increases their likelihood to mate with better females. Women had different pressures, which could not be solved by taking risky decisions. They needed to display traits of fertility, not strength and dominance. Chinny's going to talk to you more about gender differences.
So I'm going to talk to you guys about the gender differences in risk-taking. Research around this pertains to mating in regard to finding a partner more or less attractive for their level of risk-taking and male intersexual competition. There's also research pertaining to reproduction and fertility, studying whether female fertility status influences risk-taking behavior. So I'll be telling you all about the studies today. For the first study, they conducted a series of studies to determine what types of risk-taking is attractive and had male and female subjects rate the attractiveness of risky behaviors. The researchers used something called a domain-specific risk inventory. This allowed them to distinguish whether risk-taking is attractive generally or only in certain domains. Both sexes reported social and recreational risk-taking as attractive, but other domains of risk-taking, ethics, gambling, and health were deemed as unattractive. This study suggests that recreational risk-taking could be a cue of physicality. This is in line with data showing that men compete for the attention of women by demonstrating athletic ability and displaying strength. The attractiveness for social risk-taking was not significant, but there is existing evidence that women value social status in a long-term mate and prefer marriage partners with success in their profession and promising future career prospects. However, there are some concerns whether social risk-taking really does signal present or future social status. In the unattractive domains, it may be that risk-taking does not correlate with the quality of a mate. A key focus in this study was risk perception. Both sexes are good at predicting the attractiveness of different risky behaviors to the opposite sex. This suggests that members of each sex have a well-tuned ability to predict the other sex preferences, even if they differ from their own. For the final study of the couple's risk perception, they found a positive assortment for the risk-taking, which may be explained by a greater likelihood of encountering people with similar risk attitudes or greater compatibility between mates. For the next study, they conclude that male risk-taking relies on the available female audience and the emotional state or level of romantic arousal of the man. Signaling was a key focus in this study. Exposure to cues signaling of a mating opportunity, such as believing an available partner was watching, led to risk-taking only when coupled with strong mating-related emotions. There were complement risk theories affecting decision-making to the domain mating shows effective influences on choice and are moderated in predictable ways by functionally relevant aspects of the situation. Another key focus of this study was intersexual competition. The results of the study parallel with evolutionary theories that risk-taking may stem from a male's intersexual competition. This confirms that risk-taking can serve as a signaling device in the context of mating. Although it was not significant, they observed the opposite in relationship in males and unavailable female audience. One possibility is that risk-taking in this condition could result in rejection, including the retaliation by the woman's partner, but further research needs to be done to test this. And then in the third study, Researchers wanted to see if fertility status in women taking based on choices surrounding intertemporal and risky choices. To test for this, they collected intertemporal and risky choice measures before and after exposure to images of either attractive males or neutral landscapes, both at peak and low fertility conditions. They found that in the peak of fertility, women are less impulsive compared to women at low fertility. Intertemporal choice was a key focus in this study. The peak fertility women did not prefer the risky choice option, with higher monetary outcomes following exposure to the images of attractive males. When you look at the image to the right, you can see a pattern in the same direction as the intertemporal choice data. Given the small difference between monetary options and the risky choice task, it is possible that large differences in monetary amounts may also show that in the mating mindset, women at peak fertility prefer larger payoffs. And then one thing to note is that this study was done in monetary context, and further studies need to be done.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about risk-taking as it pertains to competition and survival. From the evolutionary perspective, organisms often engage in risk-taking behaviors to meet their needs. In a study conducted by Mishra et al., the authors discussed and studied what they called the need-based pathway, as opposed to the ability-based pathway. The need-based pathway is a behavior model that explains an organism's risk-taking behavior as a means of survival. In class, we discussed how an organism's ultimate goal is to reproduce and pass on their genes, but survival is obviously essential, and therefore the need to survive precedes the need to reproduce. On the right, I included an image of Maslow's hierarchy of needs just to emphasize that physiological and safety needs are the most essential, and that can be translated across all species, unlike the top three needs. But with all risky decisions, the costs and benefits must be considered. The probability of success, probability of failure, payoff of success, and payoff of failure all must be considered. In regards to survival, there are obviously very high costs and very high benefits. An organism must also consider their individual energy budget, so they do not take risks that distribute their energy towards non-essential activities when their survival is threatened. As we mentioned with the 5 domains of risk-taking, between group competition, within group competition, and environmental risks are all selective pressures that can influence an organism's level of risk-taking behavior. With the between group competition, organisms face selective pressures such as predation and must make decisions to avoid or escape predators. For within group competition, status and rank are valued. The resource control theory is an evolutionary theory that suggests that social dominance is achieved through control of social and material resources. For both types of competition, risk-taking may lead to benefits, but within group competition often poses a threat to the organism's life, whereas the within group competition does not. Environmental risks include foraging, exploring, and migrating. Foraging is required for food and nourishment acquisition, but comes with associated risks such as foraging and eating harmful foods or exposing oneself to danger in order to find food. Exploring and migrating are important for finding the best shelter, climate, and natural resources, but could lead to worse or more dangerous conditions. The image on the right is just a very general overview of risk-taking from the evolutionary perspective, and it suggests that situations that are threatening often yield the most risk-taking behaviors. One of the most prominent theories that explains risk-taking from the evolutionary perspective is the risk-taking sensitivity theory. This theory states that the organisms are more likely to take risks when they are unlikely to achieve their goals through safer, low-risk means. This is saying that the level of risk an organism is willing to take is a result of their individual needs at the time. The image on the right illustrates this theory. The black circle represents the expected value of a high-risk option, and the arrows represent the variance of the outcomes for each, and the white circle represents the expected value of a low-risk option. When forced to choose between options of similar expected value but differing in risk, decision makers should prefer high-risk options represented by A in situations of high need because it might be the only option that gives them a chance of meeting their needs, even if there is possible downside costs, which is represented by C. And they should prefer low-risk options, represented by B, in situations of low need to ensure that the goal state is achieved and to avoid unnecessary downside costs. Levels of risk-taking can also be influenced by competitive disadvantage. Disadvantages can be typically categorized under resource, fitness, and status. With a disadvantage in any of these areas, the decision-making organism is likely to engage in higher risk behavior to meet their needs and to overcome their disadvantages. Levels of risk-taking may also vary in the presence of different environmental factors, as I mentioned before, and just overall different circumstances. A prime example of how the risk sensitivity theory works is caloric need. If a starving organism's failed foraging risk, which would be death by predation, is no worse than its current situation, which would be death by starvation, the organism seems to have nothing to lose from a failed risk, and therefore the organism would engage in high-risk behavior.
I'll be going over parenting style and children's risk-taking first. So the most common parenting styles are authoritarian, authoritative, and permissive. And the experiences that children have with parents and caretakers play a critical role in their long-term development and predicting long-term outcomes like risk-taking. And in the next slide, I'll be going over the first study about risk-taking. So it's just discussing how different parenting styles between single mothers and fathers influence factors related to child risk-taking behaviors. And what they did there was the single parents did a couple assessments about their child. A few of them are the injury behavior checklist, children's gender roles, parenting styles, parenting or parents' gender roles, and a sensation seeking scale were done. And what they found that risk-taking by boys was significantly greater than risk-taking for girls, and boys reported to participate in more masculine activities more than girls. And single mothers' authoritarian parenting style was predicted risk-taking for daughters and sons, and a single father's permissive parenting style predicted risk-taking for sons. But also, like, an interesting finding was that the authoritative parenting style of sons wasn't wasn't the same. It was actually different between mothers and fathers, but mothers use more of a authoritarian parenting style than permissive parenting style with sons than did fathers. And children's sensation-seeking personality was a strong predictor of risk-taking for sons and daughters in both types of households. And then in the next slide, I'll be talking about adolescence and risk-taking. And in this period of time, adolescents typically do more risk-taking behaviors. And effective parenting and the parent-adolescent bonds are key for youth positive development. It was found that disrupted parent-child relationships with high levels of conflict and low bonding are key risk factors for risk-taking. And parental monitoring, the parent-adolescent communication, and parenting style are important variables to consider when looking at risk-taking in adolescence. And in this next slide, I'll be going over mindful parenting because I'll be talking about it in the next study. But really quickly, it's the ability to bring non-judgmental, present-centered awareness to parent-child interactions and the experiences of parenting. And a few of the benefits are that it's related to greater psychological adjustment and fewer problem behaviors in children and adolescents. So it reduces parental stress and improves the parent-adolescent relationship quality, which this could just be because parents are better able to exercise self-regulation, avoid cycles of reactivity, negative parenting behaviors, and just have a better relationship filled with warmth and closeness to their child. So in this next study, researchers looked at the effects of a mindful parenting style on adolescents and their tendencies for risky behavior. And what they found was greater levels of mindful parenting were associated with decreased odds of adolescent substance use and early sex behaviors. Also, it was related to less parent negative emotion expression in the conflict interaction. And in the conflict interaction of the study, is just basically a 10-minute video recorded conversation between the parents and adolescents over their highly rated conflict topic from a response on an issues checklist that they completed earlier. And it's just looking at how both the parent and child were talking to each other, like their reactions in that discussion. And researchers think that mindful parents may be less reactive and better able to regulate their responses to stressful parenting interactions, including the way parents express themselves emotionally. So they think that when parents displayed fewer negative emotions during this conflict discussion, it showed a greater proportion of shared positive emotion between a parent and adolescent. So what they think mostly is that these findings highlight the relevance of emotional functioning in the context of stressful parenting situations, mindful parenting. And that is it. And thank you guys for tuning in today.